Aaron Glenn was voted number 1 amongst every coordinator as the NFLPAs out of 1,700 players and coaches who they would take as their head coach. Actually, I think it was just players. I didn't know there's that many players in the NFL. 1,700? Does that add up? 32 teams, 53? Yeah.
Yeah. Practice squad guys too. Yeah.
Yeah. What does that mean to you? I mean, like, people have been calling for his job for the majority of the year, up until I'd say the Broncos game at least.
I mean, it makes sense. We've talked about it, about how he's, the defense is not the most loaded with talent as some people like to think it is. So you can't blame everything on Aaron Glenn. He's obviously a leader of men. People like playing for him. We've talked to people, Lee McNeil called him a genius. Yeah. So he has a very good reputation amongst players. He knows what he's talking about. He can make things happen, and he's shown that when he needs to make adjustments, he can, and he has. Like, he just held Dallas to 20 points, a team that scores 30 at home every single game. So, yeah, I mean, it's not crazy to me. There's a reason he was getting interviews last year. I know partially because of the Rooney Rule, for sure, but like, he was the coach of the worst defense in football last year, and he was getting head coach interviews.
Yeah. I mean, he's done. I think he's done some pretty good things with, like, we've I guess articulated, like, making us salad with spoiled vegetables. And in a sense, with the Detroit Lions, such a young team, I'd probably say vegetables aren't even ripe yet. It's what she's working with to build you that salad. But I've been that way. I've held that stance with Aaron Glenn for quite a while. As you guys know, I'm Mr. Defend the Glenn. I think this year it's wavered a bit for myself, where I've kind of like viewed him less of a good coordinator versus like a mid-tier guy. But once you see him get the pieces that he's wanted on this defense, and I'm talking about the Fontu Melifonwu obviously getting healthy. We can finally start him at the safety position. Obviously, they signed CJ GJ for somewhat of a reason. They drafted Brian Branch for somewhat of a reason. I think you want to utilize those guys in that safety hybrid nickel spot. They wanted Devon Witherspoon. He hasn't had those. But now you finally see him get those pieces. And now you're starting to see his defense come alive a little bit here too. Aiden Hutchinson obviously has he's been great in rushing the quarterback and getting like pressures by whatever metric you want to measure that at, but he hasn't been able to land the actual sack numbers. Now you see those happening too. I think everything's starting to like turn the page with this defense starting to get healthy, and I think it's perfect timing for Lee McNeil to turn back now. James Houston coming back at some point here, and not going to be this week, and they confirmed that, but the following week into playoffs, I'm hoping maybe then. But CJGG on top of that too. Chris, you had something to say on this one?
Yeah, it makes you almost question, have we been aggressively praising the wrong Lions coordinator? And not to say that either one is good or bad, but I mean, there's a reason, like you said, Aaron Glenn is getting head coaching interviews despite having one of the worst, if not the worst, defense in the NFL last year. So this is a guy that's proven that he can take, like you say, spoiled vegetables and turn it into something. And Brad Holmes, let's be real, like Ben Johnson versus Aaron Glenn, Brad Holmes has invested heavily in the offensive side, particularly in last year's draft when we all wanted and pushed for him to invest heavily in the defensive side of the ball. In the first couple rounds, he invested very heavily in the offensive side of the ball. So I think that when you look at the weapons that the offense has versus what the defense has, I think that you got to believe that at some point Brad Holmes is going to address that side of the ball, hopefully this offseason, and then you're going to get to really see what Aaron Glenn can do, because the fact is he's already doing this with what he has.
Let me answer your question, Chris. No, we have not been praising the wrong coordinator, because Ben Johnson is still a wizard. He has been doing things that no coordinator in the history of the NFL has done, and there's been a lot of very loaded offenses. So I still think that Ben Johnson deserves all the praise that he's getting. But yeah,
Aaron Glenn, kicking dogs.
Aaron Glenn has caught a lot of slack. Aaron Glenn has caught a lot of hate from Lions fans when he turned this defense from the worst defense in the NFL last year to a middle-of-the-pack defense this year without getting too much more talent than what he already received.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to point out too, is like you look at the criticism of Aaron Glenn, it's basically been the fans. And I get that. They're fanatics. They're kind of impatient. We're in the microwave generation of things. People want their top 10 defense now. They want, and this is not the way things necessarily work all the time, especially when you got injuries that we've dealt with too. I think Aaron Glenn has been a formidable defensive coordinator. I've been on that bandwagon the whole season, and it's not just me either. When we had other guys like Mike Payton on the show, we've had, not even just like across the league. If you want to look at like national sources too, people will look at you and tell you like, yeah, this is lacking personnel. less of a defensive coordinator situation.
And I see people talking about, he's addressed the defense more than the offense statistically. And yes, Brad Holmes has, but like look at where he's investing. And also, like, are you putting Levi and some of these defensive picks that haven't worked out? Are you putting that on Aaron Glenn? Because I'm not. Right? Like, I'm not looking at those draft picks that didn't work out. I'm looking at those as prospects that didn't work out. Whereas the offensive side of the ball, they invested highly in Gibbs and Laporta and all of that. So I know they've invested highly in the defense, especially in the second round, but those prospects not working out is more so to them than to Aaron Glenn. Mm-hmm. So I think when you give Aaron Glenn the same amount of talent, the same level of prospects that you've given Ben Johnson, I think that Aaron Glenn can do some great things.
Yeah, I think I'm with you too. Like when you look at the investments that they've made on the defensive side of the ball versus the offensive side of the ball, I think just in terms of value, first and second rounders, you got Aiden Hutchinson for the defensive side of the ball, Josh Pascal, and I don't remember who went first, Aleem or Levi.
Levi.
Was it Levi that went first?
Yeah.
Okay, so Aleem and Levi. But then you look at the offensive side of the ball
Campbell,
in terms of
Branch.
I got Campbell. Actually, I did forget those guys the past 2 years. Well, then you start evening out a little bit because I was gonna say you got J-Mo first round pick.
Yeah.
You got Laporta second round pick, Sewell first round pick, Gibbs second round pick. I'm sorry, first round pick. So I guess it does even out when you put in Campbell and Branch from this year.
The raw numbers even out, but I think the prospect talents, and people are saying, does coaching not matter? Or is he not supposed to coach these players up? I think he showcased that he's coached up. I think that's a ridiculous argument. And like Levi in his case is health. That's not on Aaron Glenn. That's not on.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's blaming Aaron Glenn for Levi's lack of development.
No, I'm just using him particularly as an example. I think that, again, when you give more talent to this defense, I think that Aaron Glenn has shown that if he can. I just think it's crazy to me that you look at these players that he's undrafted or late round picks like Malcolm that he's turned into or that he's helped develop into great players or key contributors.
Kirby.
And why do you think he can't do that with higher end talent? That just boggles my mind. Just have some patience.